I want to start by thanking you all for being here. It's just amazing to look out into this audience and receive this energy. I want to focus on the women here today. When we think of the word resilience, maybe we think of the tenacity, the courage, the fierceness that it takes to get through the unexpected, to come out better than you thought. I want to redefine resilience with you all today by talking about it in one of the most underestimated but pending, most complex situations facing our global community currently, forced displacement. UNHCR's global appeal for the year 2024 estimates that under their mandate, 130.8 million stateless and forcibly displaced people need urgent service. These numbers are harrowing, as they're not just numbers, but each encompasses a story and their own things. Let us begin with critical intersections in this talk. Resilient women. When we think of resilient women, we may think of women like Rigoberta Menchú, Shireen Abu Akleh, Maya Angelou, Nadia Murad, Yusra Mardini, Salima Masari, Narges Mohammadi, and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Women who give us the inspiration and a vision for a future that includes us at all levels, despite perilous and often deadly journeys, beyond the glass ceilings and dangers to their own well-being. Their resilience has produced for us momentous change. And in the hopes of adding to the other conversations and the talks here today, I want to add another critical intersection, the resilience of forcibly displaced women. So why specifically these intersections? I want to animate this with a story of a young woman I met back in 2013. After living in an abusive household for most of her life, she had managed to escape her perpetrator. From the ages of 6 to the ages of 20, she had endured severe domestic violence, which included sexual, psychological, physical, and verbal abuse. Having been recently diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder and struggling to function in her daily life, she was working as a hostess while trying to begin her associate's degree at a community college. She spoke of the invisible scars that the abuse had left on her, other than the ones that showed on her face and body. She also bore the wounds of her family's story of forced displacement. Immigrating to the United States in the late 90s, she had left her homeland with her mother. The prospects of returning were very slim, as the country was suffering decades of internal conflict. By the time we met, she had lived in over 5 different states, attended over 10 different schools, and had not lived in one home for more than a couple of years. And even though she had succeeded in removing the perpetrator from the home, he would still harass her and her family constantly, waging threats in order to continue harnessing control over the situation and over the family. Having found loopholes in the system for so many years, the perpetrator knew the boundaries well enough not to legally cross them. Even when she appealed to attorneys, they would inform her and her family that unless egregious bodily harm with substantial proof was provided, which is a huge gray area, nothing could really be done about it. So shortly after we met, she dropped out of college to tend to her weakening mental health, which was a result of her trying to be purely resilient. But why was this her definition of resilience? Why was she ashamed of quitting her job and dropping out of school to heal when she most needed it? The truth is that for many women, this is not only the story of their lives, but it's also something they carry hidden. And this is why I think that we should acknowledge that amongst communities of forcibly displaced women, but also women from that host country, this is their reality. You see, we haven't arrived at a point yet in our society where speaking about gender-based violence is not still taboo or simply deemed a feminist issue, but it's actually a human issue, because violence in every form affects each and every one of us. But even more so for forcibly displaced women in countries where their rights are already non-existent or carry many minimum legal weight. Amidst the conversation of reporting and the loopholes and the gaps, I want to analyze this context with an assessment of the following 3 factors. The first addresses a lack of legal protection for forcibly displaced women experiencing gender-based violence. The second is the media bias behind what forced displacement is and what it brings with it to the host nation. And the third is the speaking of the lack of resources and community that survivors, wounded healers, and victims have in this already vulnerable state. I think we can all agree that language matters, and I would tackle the idea that based on these three factors, resilience is therefore a double-edged sword for women in displacement. So what is a double-edged sword? Let's go with the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition: something that has or can have both favorable and unfavorable consequences. Let me illustrate the picture with some data. An alarming report by the World Bank released in 2021 stated that almost 1 in 3 women across the world have experienced intimate partner violence and non-partner sexual violence at least once in their lifetime. Another report that encompasses this insane number is reported on by the United States. I read an article recently that spoke about intimate partner violence and immigration in a systemic way. And it stated that when examining intimate partner violence, the group of women who reported experienced higher rates or even comparable to US-born women rates of intimate partner violence. Narrowing the scope for the sake of this talk, I want to focus on the numbers that are reported on by Western host nations, as I believe that the issue of gender violence is always pinned against the forcibly displaced, as if it doesn't exist in these Western countries. So a study of the CDC in 2021 estimated that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men in the US experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime. Canada reported similarly the same year, saying that more than 4 in 10 women have experienced some form of intimate partner violence in their lifetimes. But actually looking over these huge numbers and quotients on these portals of data, none of them speak specifically of forcibly displaced populations. Conversely, a fact sheet produced by the European Institute for Gender Equality in 2022 stated that according to World Health estimates, 1 in 4 women in the WHO European region will experience gender-based violence at some point in their lives. And the European Coalition Against Violence for Women and Girls published another fact sheet back in 2017 that said, and I quote, "Undocumented women and women with a dependent migratory status on a spouse or employer are at a heightened risk of abuse and exploitation. This is because the risk of being detained and deported rather than assisted, they face particular barriers in accessing support, protection, and services." What these reports all have in common is that they lay bare a gap that is most explicitly and consistently unaddressed on an international level, and often only tackled by local grassroots organizations that struggle to advocate these causes, which leads to limitation of funding and the legal obstacles that exist because forcibly displaced communities are not accepted. While actively promoting the resilience of the forcibly displaced is essential to the raising of awareness regarding the toll it takes on a human to make a journey of this kind, it is also often used to suppress their need to express and seek justice in their host nations. I hear very often the rhetoric of, "You should be grateful you made it out," as if this was somehow a quotient. A question that immediately comes to mind when hearing this is if the issue of gender-based violence extends further to the women who are already citizens of those host nations, how can we, according to this data, partner to create safety and spaces of cohesion so that we can tackle these systemic issues together? The young woman shared with me many instances where her teachers, parents of friends, and other individuals in her community urged her to just accept her fate. Even when Child Protective Services would get involved in her home life due to reports from her school, the main option was usually to remain silent for fear of being separated from her siblings, being put into the foster care system, or running into issues with immigration as she was still not a citizen. There's always an aspect of neglect in her story, the way that the system failed her, but also the way that those who could have helped her shape the narrative of her resilience. In one instance, she was waterboarded by her perpetrator and chose to stay quiet because she didn't want to run into issues with the police at the hospital. So she said she had fainted in the shower. Even then, she felt her silence was equivalent to resilience. It was also common for her to witness this type of violence in the homes of her friends, classmates, and other individuals as well. They felt like silent battles that kind of doubled as well-kept secrets to integrate properly into her host society. In retrospect, a large part of her silence was also due to the fact that her perpetrator felt protected by the system, knowing well that the threat of losing it all over again would force her into a state of acceptance. Even when that didn't exist anymore because she had become a citizen, the society she had integrated herself into still did not have the resources to protect her fully. In the state of New York, for example, the limitations for reporting domestic violence have changed as recently as 2019, changing it from 1 year to 2 years. New York City is a sanctuary city. Therefore, this is the best case scenario. And this is not a space of safety or cohesion for women who do not know the language and have no access to legal resources. Unfortunately, in order to benefit from these services, you have to be recognized as a resident in the state. This is still not enough, I believe. As telling this story, I want to tell you that she made it through because she found many places along the way. Mentors, friends, colleagues who sheltered her when she found herself periodically homeless due to her perpetrator's abuse. Small moments of comfort in community. Let us begin thinking of resilience and defining it as a community process and a communitarian responsibility. It is both the strength of this young woman and the strength and courage of those who accompanied her that allowed her to bounce back. This does not discount her ineffable and consistent courage, but it also speaks of how community can make the difference between life and death. We surely can benefit from having very difficult conversations about our levels of empathy for one another, or the lack thereof. In a world where the media often bombards us with high quantities of violent and distressing content while sensationalizing narratives that paint the forcibly displaced in a negative light, the risk of becoming desensitized poses the question of how we tend to compare, relativize, or even become indifferent to the resilience of the forcibly displaced, running the risk of becoming yet another generation that says, nothing's gonna change, that happens everywhere. Okay, what am I supposed to do about it? I want to loop back to the examples of the women that I gave earlier. They have taken it upon themselves to create sustainable and long-lasting change through community, starting movements, raising awareness in their context, shedding light on these layers of oppression and suffering. Let us not lose sight of the progress that has been made over the years, but what's also left to be done. The economic systems we live under, the situation of geopolitical systems that we are currently facing, and the conflicts in the shape of proxy wars that are waged, the devastation on both the environment and human lives, call us to remember our shared humanity. The previous points I made don't only come from professional and work experience, but they come because that young woman that I was telling you about is me. It's been 11 years since I received my new lease on life, and I made it through because of the people who helped me on this healing journey. The love they saw beyond the scars, the reconstructive surgery, the therapy, lived every single triumph, every single obstacle. It is the communitarian resilience that has allowed me to stand before you, but has also given me the space and the courage to fall apart safely. I should not be the exception. I should be the norm. Therefore, I believe that my journey, which is still ongoing, because once you are forcibly displaced, you enter a spectrum that lasts a lifetime, should be all of our responsibilities. I want to therefore propose that if resilience can be thought of as a double-edged sword, how can we ensure that forcibly displaced women don't have to see both ends of that blade, and hopefully one day never see that blade? Let us explore a combination of powerful proposed solutions that have personally inspired me and have also been given on other TEDx talks and spaces. On a societal level, let's continue promoting policy that pressures governments to actively fight gender-based violence for all people residing in a country regardless of their legal status. On a communal level, let's center and elevate the voices of the forcibly displaced, in decision-making environments and hold no impunity towards organizations, systems, and individuals engaged in the practice of suppressing said voices. On a personal level, let's create safe spaces for forcibly displaced women using all collective and creative resources, as we have heard today from the other talks. The arts, education, innovation, all channels of expression that can help to promote this healing. I assure you, Mother Earth herself teaches us how to navigate a double-edged resilience. She performs it for us every single day. Anytime that she's carved out in the name of profit and greed for the few, she still finds a way to be bountiful and generous, but still cry out in pain, giving us the water, the food, and the land we live on, while providing extreme temperatures, destruction, and other catastrophes. Let us be inspired by her way of speaking to sustain one another on a journey to change, which is built slowly but surely. To all those who tried to stop me from speaking and using resilience against me, I invite you to this conversation. To my perpetrator, I will continue to share my story and speak loudly so that individuals like you do not feel confident to move throughout society with ease. To those of you who have gotten me to this place, those of you in the audience, thank you. I have hope and I believe in it because of you. To those of you here who have heard the rhetoric of you're strong and resilient, you'll be just fine, other people go through worse, I see you, I hear you, I believe you. Speak your truth to power, elevate one another's voices. Together, we can redefine resilience for forcibly displaced women. Olive trees do not grow overnight, but every single seed that is properly watered and cultivated bears fruit in its due time. Ipqua.